Good morning. Today is the 26th day of Teves, the 7th of January. And we're starting a new Parsha, Parashat Vayera. If you have been following the morning classes, so about half a year ago, we studied in depth this first reading. And it was part of our series on Is Exile a Punishment? If you remember that series. Today we're going to look at different topics from it. Some of them will overlap, but most of them are new. But I really recommend going back to that series. It was a long series. I think it was about 30 classes. Each one's about 15 minutes, so they add up. But I really recommend it. It's a very, very important teaching, and I hope you have time to watch it. Okay, so let's look at the first reading. The first reading, God gives Moses the answer to the question, basically to the question he asked at the end of last week's Torah portion, Shemot. And Moses basically asked, why have you made their lives harder? Since I've come, it's only become worse. And God now tells him what the purpose of the exile in Egypt was, and what the purpose of leaving Egypt is going to be. And I would like to read it from inside, because these are very important verses, and in the inner teachings of the Torah, especially in the Zohar, they are studied in depth, each one of these verses. And so he says to him like this: I have therefore heard the Israelites groaning, complaining that the Egyptians are enslaving them, and I have recalled my covenant. What was this covenant? This covenant with Abraham. Therefore, in accordance with these promises, convey to the Israelites, I am God. I will free you from the burdens of the Egyptians, save you from their servitude, and redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great chastisements for the Egyptians. I will take you to myself as a nation, and I will be your God, and you shall know that I am Havaya, your God, who is freeing you from the burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you to the land regarding which I raised my hand to swear that I would give it to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I will give it to you as a heritage. I am God. And Moses related this message to the Israelites, but they did not listen to Moses because of their anguish of spirit, or shortness of breath, as one might translate it, and because of the harsh labor. And so God is saying here that there's a purpose to all of this. It's not a punishment. Here too, we don't see this. It has nothing to do with a punishment. This exile was not a punishment. It was in order to bring them to know God. And that is the operative part of everything that we just read. To come to know God, to realize that Havaya is God. Now, the interesting thing is that we know these verses from the Seder night. In the Seder, and this is already in the Mishnah, there are 4 verbs here. In Hebrew, they're ve'otzeti, ve'itzalti, ve'ga'alti, ve'lakachti. And they mean, I will free you, I will save you, I will redeem you, and I will take you. And these 4 verbs, because of them, we have 4 cups of wine during the Seder. And we have 4 sons, maybe because of that also, even though the 4 sons are also, as we've studied in the past, they also correspond to readings in Deuteronomy and in Exodus about the children that will ask you about the traditions of Pesach. But it's interesting that the Talmud and the Mishnah don't dwell on this continuation that we just read. That I will be your God, you will know that I am God, and I will bring you to the land that I promised your forefathers. So about the last one, that I will bring you to the land, we know that there are some opinions, even already in early times, that this is also one of the 4 idioms of redemption. I will bring you to the land, because that is really, in the end, that's the end the end goal of this whole process of coming to the land of Israel. But it's interesting that the Talmud and the Mishnah don't mention the idea of I will be your God and you will know that I am God. But the Zohar turns this into a very important cornerstone. And actually, when we ask, what is the first commandment? The very first commandment. So many times we say, well, the first commandment chronologically is a commandment to be fruitful and multiply, to have offspring, because that's what Adam was commanded. But when we look at it in terms of the logical order of commandments, the first commandment is that God will be our God, and that we will realize that. We will know that God is our God. Now, this is such an important commandment that let's read a little section from the Wonders. In his commentary on the Zohar, the Rebbe's father, Rebbe Levi Yitzchak Schneerson, writes that this verse we are studying, "You shall know that I am Havaya your God," constitutes a nearly explicit source for Maimonides' understanding of Torah. Maimonides begins his book with the words, "The foundation of all foundations and the pillar of wisdom is to know that there is a primary being who brought into being all existence." This is the commandment to have knowledge of God. But, as it's explained in Chassidus, there are two types of knowledge of God. There is the general statement that there is God, who is responsible for all that there is. And then there is the particular, the detailed statement, which means to encounter God in one's life. Meaning, without the general statement, there's no room for all the other commandments. They don't even start. It's the foundation upon which everything is built. And that's why Maimonides calls it the foundation of all foundations. And it's from this reading that I will be your God and you will know that I am God. But here is not talking about you will know that I am God in the sense yet that a person sees it detailed in his life, rather than just the general statement upon which everything is based. But in the end, then comes the entire Mishnah Torah, the entire Maimonides corpus of all the laws, and at the end, it all leads up to the closing words describing the Messianic era. And there he says, at the very, very conclusion of his huge work, in that era there will be neither famine nor war, envy nor competition, for good will flow in abundance and all the delights will be freely available as dust. The occupation, meaning what people will do all day, of the entire world will be solely to know God. Therefore the Jews will be great sages and know the hidden matters, grasping the knowledge of their Creator according to the full extent of human potential. As Isaiah 11:9 states, the world will be filled with the knowledge of God as the waters cover the ocean bed. So this is already talking at the very end of his book. He says, after you perform all these commandments, now I'm coming with you to the point of it all. It's not just to know God in the general sense, it's to become aware of God in every single detail of life. And in a sense, that is what Judaism is about, according to Maimonides. What we said before, it's how Maimonides understands the whole purpose of the entire Torah. The purpose is not just to let us know that there's God. It's to imbue God in every single facet of our life. And that's why the commandments span every single facet of a person's life, the entire life cycle from the moment from before he's born until after he passes away. Everything is filled with knowledge of God, and that is the purpose of this idiom. And you will know me. So first of all, know me in the general sense, and then you will come to know me in the particular sense. And when does Moses say the particular sense? He doesn't say it here. Here we said this is the general sense, and that's how the Zohar explains it. So the Zohar says there's a general commandment to know God, and there's a detailed commandment to know God in the details. The one that's speaking about the general commandment is here in our reading, and you will know me. When do we learn about the particular details? We learn them at the end of the Torah in Deuteronomy, Moses says, "V'yadata yom v'ashevota elovecha ki Hashem Elokim b'shamayim me'al v'al haaretz mitachat." You shall know today, and introduce it into your heart, that God is, Havaya is God, in the heavens above and in the earth below. There is none other. And that is actually also the entire teachings of Moses. How is this different than the patriarchs? The difference is that the patriarchs didn't have the commandments. And so by the patriarchs to introduce God into every aspect of their lives was all through sacrificing themselves, all through giving themselves up, meaning they weren't commanded to do anything, but everything that they did with the consciousness that what I'm doing now, I am doing in order to serve God. But that was doubly difficult. The whole point of Moses' mission is to bring this down for us, to make it possible, so that when I wake up in the morning and I say Mode'ani, immediately I have a relationship with God. I never walk in my life in a way where I don't think of God in some way. I don't, and somebody would say, but that's too extreme. How can you live that way? I would argue exactly the opposite. That for a person to live detached, even for a moment, is not life. It's not life because I have no life of my own. And if I am fooling myself into feeling that somehow I'm autonomous, I am separate, I am able to function by myself, I don't need anything, including, of course, the divine. So in that sense, I'm losing myself, I'm losing touch with myself. God willing, tomorrow night I'm flying to America, and one of the things that people have been speaking to me at the different places where I'm going to be is that they want to hear more and more about why are we not in touch with ourselves? Why is there so much suicide? Why is there this? Why is there all these different problems? And they're not just talking about the regular American culture. They're talking about Jewish culture. They're talking about Hasidic culture even. And in my opinion, the reason is because you can't live a life. You can't have a meaningful life. You can't have a moment that is full of life force, if you don't have the detail that goes into the detailed belief in God, not just the general inclusive principle that we learn in our reading. You have to have it introduced and entered into every single aspect of life. And then when you live, if you have an argument with someone, even at that moment, there are things that connect you back to the Almighty that you keep saying to yourself, what is this argument about? Is this really something I should be worried about? Is it really the way I should be acting? Should I maybe think about apologizing in this way or that way? Again, because it's not just about me. I'm not here by myself. I'm not here autonomously as some island in the middle of the ocean. I'm connected. I'm constantly connected. I constantly feel the life force that is within me. And this comes through the detailed belief in God that we begin in our Parsha, and next Parsha, in the next Torah portion, in Bo, it actually becomes official. But here we already have, as the Zohar says, this is the beginning of Moses' commandments to the Jewish people, the general, inclusive principle of believing in God. And afterwards, you will come to the detailed belief in God, which comes through all the commandments that he's going to start teaching us from the next portion. Just one last point is that even though we said that the Mishnah and the Talmud talk about 4 idioms of redemption, and we may add the 5th one, which is I will bring you to the land that I promised, when you add these 2, I will be your God and you will know that I am God, we have a total of 7. And then once we have 7, we can correspond them to the 7 emotive faculties, from loving kindness to kingdom. Since we don't have enough time now, I refer you to what we wrote in the Wonders, and should be up on the Patreon as well, patreon.com/Galeinai, Galeinai. Thanks for tuning in. Tomorrow we'll have one last class from Israel, and God willing on Tuesday morning. Might be a little bit later than the usual because I might not get into Los Angeles until about 6 a.m. I'm not sure that by 6:15 I'll be able to give the class, but even if it's an hour later or so, maybe 2 hours later, we'll have the class on Tuesday. Good to see everyone. Hope to see you during the rest of the week.